Okay, so before we start, I think it's important to note that not every killer needs to stand toe-to-toe with the nurse. It is okay to have mediocre killers, as most of the player base is casual. That being said, we need to talk about the Onryo. Sadako is probably the most genuinely terrifying killer in Dead by Daylight, and arguably the most well-built from a purely aesthetic standpoint. From the way she never touches anything, to her perfectly designed animations, to the VFX of her weird, glitchy fading in and out of something that doesn't really belong in this world, all culminating into an experience that makes me actually afraid to play against her, and makes her as a killer feel fun to play. Which is why it's unfortunate that I have to pull on my parents now, and admit that I'm thoroughly disappointed in your behavior. Sadako is mediocre at best as a killer. Now, listen, I know I'm a little late to this, as Daddy Otstarva already did a video calling her C tier, and Dowsy's out here like, nah fam, she's going to change the meta. Now, I really don't give a fuck about either of these opinions. Ots could get a 50 win streak using a paperclip, and Dowsy, well, Dowsy plays VHS. Yes, they're both valid to a point, but that also means that they're both wrong. The Onryo still needs some adjustments in my opinion, and survivors have already begun adapting to her playstyle, meaning that they've already begun abusing the flaws in her kit. Let's take a look at this kit for a second, because I really want to talk about this. Now, BHVR made a big oopsie and lost the license to Stranger Things, and all the new players coming into the game will never really get to experience the joys of maining Demo Puppy, but that is not an excuse to just staple its fucking power onto a brand new killer. Look, I get it. Thematically, it makes sense for Sadako, and watching her crawl out of a TV is one of the creepiest things in the game. But you cannot tell me that this power isn't just a Wish.com version of Demo's portals. Yes, the teleport is faster, but you have no control over where the TVs spawn on the map, and the survivors are actively incentivized to take that ability away from you. Now, yes, the team did add in the condemn mechanic as a bit of pseudo slowdown to a base kit, but it builds up so slowly that it's basically negligible, and survivors for the most part can completely ignore it until they absolutely need to, meaning that there's no real punishment for them to take away your power, or to just straight up ignore you. Moving on to her manifest and demanifest ability, we see another example of behavior just going copy-paste and calling it game design. This ability is just the shittier version of Wraith's entire kit. You get no move speed while demanifest, your cloak still leaves you very visible within a certain radius, and despite the fact that you aren't really slowed whilst cloaking or decloaking, unlike the Wraith, you can't body block loops, nor do you get any speed boost coming out of cloak to help you with some of that anti-loop. This means that when it comes to the chase, you know, the actual fun part of the game, Sadako is about as threatening as the endgame lobby chat. Sure, it can be hurtful and annoying, but you always have the option of spamming GG easy and then just dipping. The Onryo has no way of disrupting you in a loop, meaning that if you're even slightly competent at running Shack or an LNT wall, she should never be able to catch you, as she has nothing to help her chase potential. No slowdown, no projectiles, no disables, nothing. Whilst in a loop, Sadako is the definition of an M1 killer, making her incredibly easy to bully and run for extended periods of time. Now, whilst you could potentially counteract this by using your projection in creative ways to intercept survivors, that power is still largely out of your control and requires not only the TV to be on, but in a position that is advantageous to you. The current meta that our overlords of behavior have beset us with heavily favors killers who can get downs fast and exert their pressure by progressing the game through hook states, forcing survivors away from generators to assist their team. Slowdown may be very prevalent in the meta, but a lot of strong regression perks rely heavily on the killer's ability to get downs, and perks like Thanatophobia and Sloppy Butcher are still largely negligible just due to the strength of healing in the meta. Yes, in theory, Sadako has tons of map pressure, but that is offset by her shocking lack of ability when it comes to actually securing downs. And whilst I'm sure that any really good killer player could make the most out of a kit, the way MMR currently is, it is important to take into consideration the capabilities of equally good survivors who will abuse her shortcomings. Sadako may be truly terrifying, but she is not threatening. For this reason, I'm gonna have to agree with Otstarva. Currently the way she plays feels a bit too lackluster, despite how well designed she is, and whilst I think she will be great against weaker survivors, until the meta shifts and healing becomes less prevalent, she has no chance of breaking into A tier. I'm sorry, Dowsy. All that being said, I love this killer, and I personally think her kit fits her design as well as the source material perfectly. I grew up with Japanese horror. The Ringu, The Grudge, Pulse, movies that haunt me and fascinate me to this day, and I gotta say, BHVR nailed that feeling of ominous, foreboding horror that comes from these movies, the build-up to the jumpscare that never comes until it does. In this sense, her power fits so very well. I personally could never imagine the Onryo chasing people in universe, and the character is just known for its haunting nature. Lurking, making you feel unsettled, waiting for that seventh day, and then appearing out of nowhere to exact revenge. The idea of never truly being able to escape your curse. That this force of nature will always find you. That by the time you've watched that tape, it's already too late. Well done, BHVR. I think for the first time in a while, survivors have a new killer that will actually be exciting to go up against, one that will be a truly frightening experience for most. BHVR has expressed that their game is more of a Hall of Fame for horror icons than actual balanced game design, which makes me seriously fucking question certain design choices and is by no means an excuse to ignore your community when they call out issues. This in mind though, I still belong to the part of the community that enjoys the challenge in this game, and it pains me to see a really excellently designed killer be meh at best. So what would I change about her without completely reworking her kit? Keeping in that theme with the Onryo being a killer rooted in creating fear for the survivors, I think it was a mistake not letting us see how far condemned survivors are, instead giving that information to the survivors. I think that this should be reversed, letting the survivors sit oblivious to how condemned they are until the very last moment, emphasizing the build-up of tension that is all too present in the J-horror genre. Also, the restrictions surrounding the way condemned is built up feels like a preemptive nerf. Yes, instant moris are extremely powerful, but I still think that this was a bad idea, as it makes her power more reliant on survivor negligence as opposed to actual skill. If a survivor gets fully condemned, it's not because Sadako played well, it's because the survivor was playing dumb. I would love it if Condemned built up a little faster, or perhaps her TVs were able to reset more readily without the use of an iridescent add-on. This killer doesn't really have much in general, so I feel like giving her more of a looming ever-present threat that is this slow build-up as opposed to an immediate one is far more thematically fitting for Sadako Yamamura, but let me know what you think in the comments. I'm no game designer. Credit where credit's due. The devs over at BHVR may be arrogant and ignorant, but they're all incredibly talented people. That being said, they need to start listening to their community. The point of a public test beta is to get feedback from the player base and make changes accordingly, and whilst yes, you did make adjustments to Sadako pre-release, she still needs a lot more tuning. So here you go, BHVR. Here's your feedback. Now, swallow your fucking ego and listen.